Sesha Sai was a boy of 10, and he had a magnificent nose. It was a nose that many people would say had character. It was also a nose that people rarely ever saw because it was always buried in some book or the other. He took his books everywhere. He rarely spoke, and while most other kids were out in the playground, he was found beneath a tree with his nose buried in his book. The only person he came close to speaking to was the school librarian. Sesha, as his mother affectionately called him, devoured books the way some people devoured food. Every Thursday, he'd go to the library and pick out a new book. He would pick the book up and feel it in his hand, gently bobbing it up and down. He'd close his eyes, open the book, and savor the scent of paper. Only after this elaborate ritual did Sesha decide if he was interested in the book or not. Most of the time, he was. Then, he would head over to the librarian, give her a little smile and a nod as if to say, "Thank you," and leave, his nose in his book. The other children thought he was strange and huddled together and made songs about him that they sang as he walked by.
There goes Sesha, his nose in his book, wouldn't give anyone else a look. There goes Sesha, his nose in his book, wouldn't give anyone else a look. Does he have a nose? We wonder if it blows. Does he have a mouth? Is there someone who knows? Does he have lips? Are they pink, do you think? Or does he have eyes and breathe only ink? There goes Sesha, his nose in his book, wouldn't give anyone else a look.
But Sesha was not bothered by the taunts of the other children. His books were his world. Whenever he opened a book, he felt like a great explorer navigating a sea of words. It was always a great adventure. Sesha knew that books could take you places that most people only dreamed about. Why? Last week, he was a warrior, deep in the forests of Africa. He could make weapons out of sharp stones and medicines from leaves. He even helped a hurt tiger by bandaging its tail. He wrote down the ingredients for the medicine in his little brown notebook. Sesha carried his brown notebook with him everywhere and would furiously write in it from time to time. Nobody knew what was in it. They heard it contained many strange secrets. They heard it had rainbow-striped tigers and horses with wings that came alive when you saw them. Rohan and Rohit Raman were brothers in Sesha's class. They were also the unofficial rulers of the playground. Most of the other children stayed out of their way. They were forever tripping or pushing the smaller children or tying their shoelaces together when they weren't looking. The only person who wasn't afraid of the Raman brothers was Sesha. This was because he was too busy reading to notice. The Raman brothers, however, had noticed him sitting by himself under a tree and didn't take very kindly to the lack of respect. One Thursday, they sat on the bench outside the library, huddled together under their raincoats. Sesha came walking down the path as usual, his nose buried in his book. And before you knew it, Rohit's big boots sprang out and sent Sesha sprawling to the ground. His book went flying out of his arms and into a puddle of brown. The brothers clutched their stomachs and laughed as Sesha watched the precious pages of his brown notebook slowly fill with mud. Sesha stood up, his eyes brimming with tears. He marched up to the Raman brothers, who were laughing so hard they couldn't even stand straight. All the other children stopped to watch the astonishing sight of Sesha. Strange, silent Sesha stand up to the Raman brothers. The Raman brothers had stopped laughing. They were too shocked to react. You bullies, Sesha spluttered. There was silence. The only sound was the sound of rain falling on the pavement where the three boys stood. Then, suddenly, the silence was shattered by Rohan's thunderous belly laugh that rippled through the playground. Sesha picked up his book and ran home, big wet drops of rain and tears streaming down his face. News travelled fast. By the next day, every child in the school had heard about the showdown in the playground. Hey, strange silent Sesha walked up to the Raman brothers. Strange silent Sesha couldn't even get a word out. The Raman brothers took complete advantage of the situation.
Strange silent Sesha, his nose in a book, his eyes reading words that his mouth mistook.
Strange silent Sesha, his nose in a book, his eyes reading words that his mouth mistook.
When he utters, does he stutter? Can he mutter? Can he moan? Can he mumble without a mumble? Can he manage even a groan?
Strange silent Sesha, his nose in a book, his eyes reading words that his mouth mistook.
When his lips slip, feed me, and he mouth the words his eyes greet. Can he shut his mouth and throw up here?
It looks so funny, sounds so weird.
When his lips slip, feed me, can he mouth the words his eyes greet? Can he shut his mouth and throw up here?
It looks so funny, sounds so weird.
Strange silent Sesha, his nose in a book, his eyes reading words that his mouth mistook.
Strange silent Sesha, his nose in a book, his eyes reading words that his mouth mistook. Strange silent Sesha, even stranger now, also very silly, like a spluttering cow.
The taunts never used to hurt Sesha before, but now they pricked him, and he wished they would stop. Sesha sat through his classes in silence. Every now and then, Rohit or Rohan would call out from the back, "Stuttering Sesha, why don't you say something?" And the class would erupt in laughter. It wasn't that the children were cruel. They were just having too much fun to realize how hurtful words can be. They didn't know that Sesha wasn't strange or silent or silly or any of the nasty things they called him. He was just afraid of being laughed at. Then, one day, during geography class, Mrs. Raj talked about Bengal tigers. Sesha knew all about tigers. He'd once read a whole book on them. On any other day, his ears would have perked up with interest. But today, he was barely listening. "And who knows what a group of tigers is called?" asked Mrs. Raj. "Sesha?" Mrs. Raj's voice rang out. Sesha looked up to see Mrs. Raj smiling at him expectantly. He stood up and started to speak. He fell silent as sniggers rippled through the classroom. Mrs. Raj shushed the class with one stern look. He tried again. He heard the Raman brothers laughing from the back, and he fell silent and stared at his shoes. He felt Mrs. Raj's hand on his shoulder and looked up to see her holding a piece of chalk in her outstretched arm. Sesha picked up the chalk and walked to the blackboard. He drew 2 lines, and then 2 more, and 2 more. And before you knew it, a tiger emerged with a tail and long, majestic stripes on his body. The class watched in amazement as Sesha's hands flew quickly and deftly over the blackboard. Beautiful white strokes filled the board. He drew another tiger right next to the first one, and another one, and another one. And soon there were 6 magnificent striped tigers on the board. It looked as though they would start roaring any second. The class broke out into a thunderous applause. Then, in big white letters below the drawing, Sesha wrote S-T-R-E-A-K, streak. Rohan's voice rang out from the back of the class. "Looks like he's describing himself. Hey, Sesha, I think you mean freak." A group of tigers is called a streak, Rohan. But you would know that if you read more and talked less, said Mrs. Raj. The class erupted in laughter, and suddenly the Raman brothers didn't feel so lord and rulerly anymore. They went red in the face and scowled at all the children, laughing and pointing at them. "Very good, Sesha," said Mrs. Raj, as he placed the chalk in her hand. "Thank you, Mrs. Sesha paused. "Thank you, miss," he said, and sat down at his desk. Mrs. Raj smiled at him. "Maybe," she continued, looking at the Raman brothers, "next time, you boys will learn to open your books and close your mouths." The class burst into laughter again. Only this time, it was the Raman brothers whose noses disappeared in their textbooks. "Hey," Sesha heard a voice behind him whisper, "Where did you learn to draw like that?" From a book," said Sesha shyly. "Can you show me?" asked another boy. Sesha nodded, grinning shyly, and said, "Tomorrow." And with that, strange, silent Sesha opened his notebook to the lesson on Bengal tigers as Mrs. Raj's voice filled the classroom. He had a feeling that his nickname wouldn't last very long. And he was right. Because from that day on, When his classmates spoke of Sesha, they referred to him as Sher Shah, the Tiger King. And as for the Raman brothers, it wasn't long before they too were a part of the line that followed Sesha into the library every Thursday morning, where Sesha, with his elaborate ritual, would pick out a book for every student.
There goes Sesha, his nose in his book. Wouldn't give anyone else a look. There goes Sesha, his nose in his book. Wouldn't give anyone else a look. Does he have a nose? We wonder if it blows. Does he have a mouth? Is there someone who knows? Does he have lips? Are they pink, do you think? Or does he have eyes and read only ink? There goes Sesha, his nose in his book. Wouldn't give anyone else a look.
Strange silent Sesha, his nose in a book, his eyes reading words that his mouth mistook.
Strange silent Sesha, his nose in a book, his eyes reading words that his mouth mistook.
When he utters, does he stutter? Can he mutter? Can he moan? Can he mumble without a mumble? Can he manage even a groan?
Strange silent Sesha, his nose in a book, his eyes reading words that his mouth mistook.
When his lips slip, teeth meet, and he mouth the words his eyes meet, can he shut his mouth and throw up beer?
It looks so funny, sounds so weird.
When his lips slip, teeth meet, can he mouth the words his eyes meet, can he shut his mouth and throw up beer?
It looks so funny, sounds so weird.
Strange silent Sesha, his nose in a book, his eyes reading words that his mouth mistook.
Strange silent Sesha, his nose in a book, his eyes reading words that his mouth mistook. Strange silent Sesha, even stranger now, also very silly, like a spluttering cow.
In Patna, the capital of Bihar, lived Kalia, a cobbler, and his wife Swapan. They were famous for the special shoes they made. Shaped out of sturdy, shining leather, the shoes curled in front with great style. All the rich and famous men of Patna, there were many in that prosperous city, wore Kalia's shoes. Squeak, squeak, went Lallu Bhai as he walked down the main road. Everybody stopped to watch him go by, his dhoti flapping in the wind. Squeak, 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 went Lakhan Bhai as he sailed past, his shoes squeaking even louder. Everybody turned to watch him, even Lallu Bhai. It was said that the more powerful a man was, the louder his shoes squeaked. Wife, children, and servants heard him coming from a great distance away. Quickly, the children got off his favorite chair, and the servant dusted it down. Jadu Bhai, a very important man, had bought himself a pair of brand new shoes from Kalia. He couldn't wait to try them on. But first, he sat on a charpai in his courtyard and puffed on his hookah. He sipped a glass of hot elaichi-flavored tea. He sent Bhola the servant to fetch his betel nut box. Then he put his feet into the new shoes. A strong gust of wind tossed the curtains. The windows banged and the door swung open. Bhola rushed out of the house. Jadu Bhai was missing. Bhola was afraid. He whimpered as another strong gust of wind nearly knocked him down. He watched with round eyes as a smoky blue mist appeared above the charpai. The tail of the mist seemed to disappear into a pair of brand new curly shoes. Wait! They looked like Jadu Bhai's shoes. Oh, they sounded just like Jadu Bhai's shoes. Indeed, they were Jadu Bhai's shoes. Had his master become a bhoot? A ghost? Moaned Bhola and fainted. Kalia and Swapan lived on the other side of River Ganga, where poor people from other trades lived.
Funny, isn't it?
Kalia said to Swapan one night as they were eating the last few grains of rice from a leaf bowl.
Funny how, when people want their shoes, they send their servants to our hut. They talk so sweetly to us because they want their job done.
Said Swapan thoughtfully.
Funny, isn't it? When they have to pay us for the work we have done, they forget where we live.
Forget even what we look like. They make us beg at their doors and then throw us only a small part of what they owe.
Kalia stood up. He picked up the hurricane lamp and raised its flame. The small room grew brighter and the shadows became smaller.
I'm tired of being poor,
He said.
Swapan. I'm going to do something about it right now.
I am going to do something about it right now.
Imitated Swapan.
You have said this so many times before.
This time, I mean it.
Said Kalia. Swapan only sighed loudly. She knew exactly what Kalia would do. Kalia tied a cloth round his head and hurried out of the hut. The hurricane lamp bounced up and down in the huge darkness and the light shone dim. But at least Kalia could see where he was going. Kalia reached a grove of sal trees. He saw a small red light piercing the black night. He walked towards it. The smell of tobacco grew strong. Leaning against a tree sat a man with long, matted hair. He wore beads around his neck. The light that Kalia saw was the burning end of his beedi. Kalia knelt in front of the man.
Oh, Holy One,
He cried.
only you can help me. Please Please find me a ghost who can make me some money. I am sick and tired of being poor.
replied the holy man.
Are you sure this is what you want?
Oh, yes.
Replied Kalia.
Okay then. Are you?
The holy man called, snapping his fingers 3 times. There was a swish of smoky blue mist, and a ghost stood beside him. The ghost wore a pair of curly shoes,
But this is Jadoo Bhai.
exclaimed Kalia, recognizing the shoes. Yes, indeed, it was the missing Jadubai. Grunted the ghost.
I am Bothram, your servant. What can I do for you?
Baap re.
Gulped Kalia. The ghost's voice sent shivers down his spine. It didn't seem such a good idea after all. But he swallowed his fear and said,
Bhoot Ramji, I want money. Lots of money. But no cheating, huh?
All right.
replied Bhutram with a flourish.
Give me some work to do and I will earn money for you. But remember, you have to keep giving me work or else I'll eat you up and your wife too.
He looked like he meant it. Kalia thought for a moment and said,
It is time to plant the mahua seeds from here where the sun rises to there where it sets.
Bhutram pulled out a bag of gold coins from nowhere and gave it to Kalia.
Here you are, Kalia ji. Here's the money that will come out of this job.
And he took off in a cloud of smoke and dust.
Hey, so much money.
Exclaimed Kalia. He was surprised and a little afraid.
Well, this will last us for the next 3 months, by which time Bhutram would have finished planting the seeds.
He ran home to Swapan. Next morning, Swapan awoke with a start.
What is that noise?
She asked Kalia. It sounded like the clatter of vessels. There stood Bhutram, a pot in each hand, ready to throw them. Swapan shrieked.
Where is Kalia? I have finished the sewing.
Bhutram snarled.
Give me something else to do, or else I will.
Bhutram made a chomping sound. Kalia shivered.
Okay. No need to make us jump.
Said Swapan firmly.
Harvest the mahua crop, all 2,000 acres of it, brew it into wine, and keep it ready for the holy festivities.
Bhutram pulled out many bags of gold and threw them on the floor, and once more rushed off to do his job.
What a scared crow you are.
Swapan said to Kalia, who by now was quaking with fear.
By the time the seeds sprout and the trees grow, and the mahua blossoms are harvested, it will be many months.
Don't be too sure.
warned Kalia. Sure enough, by midday it seemed as though the season itself had changed. And indeed it had. The mahua trees were beginning to flower. In a little while Bhutram returned. The wine was ready to drink.
Oh my God!
Said Kalia.
He will surely eat us now. I had better do something.
Kalia raced off towards the sal grove. Bhutram came chasing after him as he stumbled over stones and crashed through bushes. He reached the sal grove and flung himself at the holy man's feet.
Sir! Sir! Help! This ghost is too much for me. He's even moved the seasons forward. I can't think of any more work to give him. What shall I do?
Bhutram stood huffing and puffing behind Kalia. The holy man looked at Bhutram. At that moment, a puppy dog came by. He had a tail as curly as an onion ring.
Hurry up!
Growled Bhutram.
Give me something to do or else!
He was really angry now. Kalia and the holy man looked at the puppy. They looked at each other. They nodded.
Okay,
Said
Bhutram.
Kalia.
See this puppy here? Catch hold of him and straighten his tail.
You have made me wait so long.
Complained Bhutram and ran behind the puppy.
Oh, I almost forgot.
He said, and flung bags of gold at Kalia. Bhutram picked up the puppy and sat under banyan. Zoing! He pulled out its tail. But the moment he let go, boing! It curled up again. Again he tried. Zoing! Again it went. Boing! Zoing! Boing! Zoing! Boing!
And so it was that Bhutramji sat for hours on end. And so it was that Bhutramji sat for hours on end and tried to straighten the puppy's tail again, again, and again. He pulled the tail with all his might and held it at the tip. But the moment he let go, the tail curled back so quick. He pulled the tail with all his might and held it at the tip. But the moment he let it go, the tail curled back so quick. He tied it to a plank of wood and sat on it for long. But when he rose to set it free, the tail curled up beyond. Oh dear me, cried Bhutramji, is this a magic tale? Is there a way to make it straight? He wondered with a wail. Oh dear me, cried Bhutramji, is this a magic tale? Is there a way to make it straight? He wondered with a wail.
He wondered with a wail.
He wondered with a wail. Oh dear me, cried Bhutramji, is this a magic tale? Is there a way to make it straight? He wondered with a wail. He wondered with a wail. Oh dear me, cried Bhutramji, is this a magic tale? Is there a way to make it straight? He wondered with a wail. And so it was that Ramji sat for hours on end and tried to straighten the puppy's tail. Again, again, and again.
Hours, days, weeks, months sped by. Banyan's aerial roots began to touch the ground. The puppy grew into a dog, but its curly tail refused to become straight. Many years later, there was a knock on Kalia's door. He and Swapan now lived in a small house. In fact, all the people on their side of the river now lived in sweet small houses. There were trees and flowers and birds. Swapan opened the door. Kalia stood behind her. Bhutram stood there in a smoky blue mist, quite grey with despair. He was sobbing. At his heel stood the dog with the curly tail.
Kalia ji, Swapan ji, please keep this dog and everything I have given you. I promise never to ask for any more work. This dog's tail can never be straightened. I want to go home, back to my sal trees.
Bhutram cried,
Certainly.
said Kalia.
And thank you for all you have given us and our friends.
He went to the holy man in the Sal Grove and told him he didn't need a ghost anymore. The holy man smiled, and with a whoosh, Bhutram returned to his safe and secret home.